This first bit of content that we're reacting to is from the most recent Inside Star Citizen. It's about Alpha 4.0 and it's titled What We Do in Space. So there's a link to it there. There's a few Spectrum posts that I'm going to be throwing in after we watch this video that kind of shows the mentality that some people have taken towards like just Pyro content in general, and a bit of a take that I agree with in terms of what CIG ends up revealing in this episode of ISC. So if you haven't watched it yet, you're about to see what's one of the or a couple of the things that they're planning in 4.0.
By this point, it's pretty safe to say that all of you watching now know that Pyro is the next star system upcoming to the Star Citizen persistent universe in the upcoming Alpha 4.0. And 2 weeks ago, we started ISC's journey through the jump point to get there. And it's a good one. You should check it out if you haven't already. But what is there actually to do in the Pyro system once we get there? It's not all just pandemonium and chaos. To start, nearly every mission type and every gameplay system we've developed for Stanton works there as well. That means a life of cargo, salvage, mining, bounty hunting missions, and more are already ready to go due to their systemic development. But that's
bounty hunting. That's one of the things, like when he mentioned that when I first watched this, Mini Band's like, yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, it's just reaction content stuff, but hopefully you enjoy that too. What he was mentioning though about bounty hunting was kind of interesting because CIG showed us like earlier this year or late last year some of the stuff that they're working on for bounty hunting gameplay that they still haven't brought in yet. So maybe they're already making, I wouldn't say content cuts, but maybe they're already starting to take into account that some of the profession features that they were originally working on just aren't going to make it. So they're like, all right, well, we'll put bounty hunting down for a bit. What we've got works for now. So let's, you know, like just focus on getting Pyro done. But I thought it was interesting that he mentioned that, considering that they're showing stuff for bounty hunting. And yeah, there was a YouTube short that they released that made it look like player base building was coming in 3.24, which from my understanding it's not. So I don't know, maybe it's a new marketing direction.
It's just the head start. There are also a number of new mission types, gameplay systems, and wholly unique experiences that arrive with Pyro and Alpha 4.0. And we'll be spending the next several weeks discussing them. Starting this week with What We Do in Space, where we're talking about a new kind of space station built with the more efficient level design lessons learned in Stanton. A brand new, ongoing, never stopping, never quitting contested zone system that'll reward you more and more the longer you can hold it. And a sneak peek at asteroid bases that'll require both ship and FPS combat combined to overcome and explore for its rewards. Let's find out more.
The audio clip says more at CitizenCon. Yeah, that's the thing, is like most people who watch YouTube shorts though, they're normally on their phone and they won't have the audio up. So they're just flicking through, and unless they hear the audio for it, they're not going to know. But because when I first watched it, I watched it without the audio and I'm like, wait, base building's coming? And it wasn't until I heard the audio for it, I'm like, okay, I get it now. It's coming at CitizenCon. That's the thing, like, you know, IG kind of knows that sort of stuff. They have a marketing department who researches that stuff. I research that stuff, learning about YouTube shorts and things like that. Most people don't listen to shorts with the audio on, which is why when you do shorts, you'll normally do subtitles with them so that people can read, because they're normally doom scrolling when they're watching shorts on their phone.
So let's start with space stations.
So in Pyro we have 12 space stations. One of them is the jump point station that you arrive at, coming from Stanton.
When you arrive in the gas cloud, you can't see every part of the station. It's impossible. In your cockpit, you're just gonna see like a bit of it. And then when you get closer, you're gonna see like, oh, yeah, that's...
What ship's that? Who recognizes that ship? Anyone? Anyone? No one? The Mantis Mark II? The Mantis DS? Doesn't look like a bloody Antares. No, it's the Zeus. Which one it is, not 100% sure. I'm pretty sure it's going to be the CL though, because that's the one that they said that they were working on. Was it the CL or the ES? I know it wasn't the Mark E, which is frustrating. But yeah, this is the Zeus. Little sneak peeks, and they said that they're going to be releasing the Zeus with Pyro, so kind of interesting to see that they're showing this now.
huge.
They are quite a bit bigger and more involved than you would find in Stanton.
The exteriors are very aggressive looking. They're very spiky. There's an almost fractal nature to it.
The space stations are owned to like different like factions, so you can see like the factions branding on top of some of the stations, and then you can see like if like rough and ready, you're gonna have problems.
The Rough and Ready gang is one of our main operators in the Pyro system. Almost every single rest stop refueling station is going to be run by Rough and Ready. They started off back in 2939 when this enforcer named Rook had had enough. He had this great plan about how they could take over the fuel operations in the system, and the ruling council of the headhunters deemed that it was too risky. But a lot of other people had gotten wind of Rook's plans, and so he ended up splintering off and kind of forming his own gang. Rook decided to take on the symbology of Rest and Relax, which is a known refueling station, and kind of do their own spin on it. And they took the double R and they became Rough and Ready. While they're totally down to defend their territory and they're not going to take any BS from anyone who's opening fire or hurting their business, they also don't get dragged unnecessarily into conflict.
This is one of those things that you expect, like, they need to be able to pass this information off in the game. And this is something that I think CIG's been falling down on a lot lately. Like, well, not lately, pretty much throughout the entire cycle of the game. All the information about stuff that happens inside the game is normally external. You know, like, unless you're watching inside Star Citizen, you wouldn't know anything about Rough and Ready. You wouldn't know that, you know, the history behind it and things like that. And it's one of those situations kind of disappointing. One of the things that I actually liked from Mass Effect was the encyclopedia. I can't remember exactly. No, the Codex from Mass Effect. When I first played that game, I got sucked into pretty much discover something, and I get sucked into reading the Codex. I actually had to stopping myself. I had to stop myself frequently from just getting lost reading in the Codex all the different stuff, which I'm normally not that much of a big lore nerd when it comes to certain things, but I've always found with Star Citizen, the information that they release quite useful. The lore that is in Star Citizen, it's a bit disappointing because, like, this is actually an interesting story, and Lens will probably lean into how missions are given by Rough and Ready. Maybe we'll get to learn more about it, but I know we've got the Galactopedia that's on the website, but I'd like to see something be introduced in-game sooner rather than later, especially considering we're supposed to be getting server meshing in 4.0.
Each of the 12 stations will have a unique exterior, and some of the ones will be Starlight Service Station, Obituary,
Polaris, did you see the Polaris?
a very happy name, Gaslight, but maybe that's not what it's really called, and Megumi Refueling, which is not as easy as it sounds to say. And of course there's Checkmate Station, which is a little bit different to how you may have seen it in the Pyro Playground and CitizenCon, and there's also Ruin Station.
What sets Ruin apart? It's the big LEO. It was originally Checkmate that you would have seen in Pyro, but it's been greatly expanded. It has significantly revised and enlarged interior with much more gameplay opportunity.
I like how they did expand on the stations after we had the playtest. What I am hoping though is, like, Pyro maintains its pretty much free market type situation where you can gain access to nearly everything there. You're just paying more for it. Like, I understand the idea behind scarcity, but getting hold of weapons and stuff like that, I think should be something that you can do easily in Pyro. Maybe the more crucial components, like good quantum drives, good power plants and things like that, would be something that you have to get from civilized space and bring across. But I won't go into it now, but them talking about the expansion of, was it Ruin Station, where they took Checkmate and made that Ruin Station. I like how they're talking about how they've expanded on it too, because Ruin Station is supposed to be close to the jump point. This is kind of like the equivalent of the Terra in the Pyro and Stanton jump point station. I used to read a lot of the Morrowind stuff there, as it, like, when I played Morrowind, Oblivion, not so much Skyrim, but when I played Morrowind and Oblivion, all the books and stuff, I get lost reading those. And, like, I'd be there trying to do a mission and, you know, end up reading a book, reading through the different ones, I'd collect them. But yeah, I think it being accessible in game though, I think that's important because it can give clues on things that you can do in the game too. Because some of the books in Morrowind, I remember, led to missions that you could do.
When you arrive at Pyro Space Station, you'll recognize some of the activities that you already do in Stanton to be done there as well.
They have the same things like weapon shops, food court, hangars.
You have direct access from your hangar to the cargo deck, and that's where you can buy your commodities, or sell them, and then you can return right away into your instance hangar and then go off on your trip. From there, you can also access the external freight elevators to easily load your whole seas. And so we've made these gameplay loops much less tiring in Pyro.
And in Ruin Station, we'll have something called the Ghost Arena, which we'll let you discover for yourselves.
So a contested zone, design-wise, we are likening them to kind of a classic MMO dungeon. Instead of the primary way of accessing this content being behind missions, we are taking more of an open approach.
It is an open space for players to go in and farm, get loot, some special rewards, and explore the station even more.
So what I really like about the contested zones is the fact that they are right next to the social space. It's really quick access, which I think is something that makes Pyro unique.
This was a concern that a lot of people bring up about Star Citizen. It's interesting, like these contested zones, the Division equivalent of a dark zone, but these contested zones being so close to the social spaces, it's interesting that COG's done this because there was a concern by a lot of players who were like, I've only got like half an hour to an hour to play Star Citizen. I want to get my fix. What are you going to do about that? Well, for those who are looking for a combat fix, loot goblin, this is the opportunity to do it. Rant's concerned about a lot of fresh spawns will keep running to the dark zone or to these contested zones and be annoying. Possibly, I think, like until we get Death of a Spaceman mechanics, if COG decides to pursue that, we'd probably see that early on. But like even if COG didn't decide to pursue Death of a Spaceman mechanics to the same level of depth that they originally talked about it, they could do things where it costs, credits to respawn and you're paying a premium in Pyro. So if you want to get respawn, you're paying a lot. There's a bit more to the contested zones, but I don't want to go too far into it because I want to showcase it here on the stream, but also there's some discussions from the Spectrum topics that also want to talk about, so I'll leave that one there. Star Citizen Live yesterday was also discussed the lore evolving, also known as being retconned due to the changes in how Pyro will work. It was an interesting watch. Normally I don't watch the lore videos that they do because they already put a lot of the content out. I might actually go and watch that another day.
You can be in the social space, you have your shops, you have the hub, you have the clinic, but the contested zone is right there, often through just a door, an airlock.
This will be very visually distinctive. It'll be very cold, there'll be ice along the walls. Some of these don't have the life support systems. The power will be generally out.
We have booby traps and mines. You'll hear the odd rustling inside the vents, with some potential surprises in it.
At some point you'll be facing multiple doors, and every door is giving you different things to fight, different rewards, and so you have to choose where to go. And some of them will be blocked through some puzzle elements like key cards to allow you to open the door and access the wing.
Some areas are more secure than others with better rewards. Other areas are highly contested and there's more players coming into that space and more like an arena. We really want to take advantage of that, the vibe for Pyro of PvP, of lawlessness, of being out sometimes alone, but hopefully you're there with your buddies to help back you up.
The zone inhabits various types of outlaws. These inhabitants are a constant population within this space, so they're not spawned via missions, they just exist there, and they will respawn over time. So this is a constantly inhabited space with a constant flow of challenges.
I like that about what they're planning on doing with those contested spaces, that even though people will clear it out, and this is something that a lot of people are concerned about with Star Citizen, like the group coming through, clearing everything out, and then the next group having to sit there and wait until the AI will spawn back in. The station has inhabitants. The AI will go into those spaces again, and it's just part of the game space as opposed to it being a mission that you have to go clear out this specific boss. It's like there'll be bosses in there, but there'll be like a nameless boss from this one gang. I think it's interesting. Something about those contested spaces though, like the abandoned parts of the stations, I really hope they have expanded on them dramatically since the last playtest that we did, because I did go into those spaces to explore and see what we could find. I did find exits that allowed us to leave the station, so there are ways to get into these stations through those abandoned zones and avoid the front gate that's got all the guards and guns. It's interesting that they've brought in, like they've mentioned that specifically, because that's something that a lot of people are concerned about, that they don't want having to wait for the AI to show up. So you may end up going through and clearing out the AI, and then another AI group comes through and they're like, oh, well, there's now free real estate. Let's come and move in. And then you got the other players though. But there's a few other things with regards to the contested zones that I'm concerned about, and one of the Spectrum posts kind of highlights it, but let's continue going.
It also inhabits creatures.
Free real estate.
Whilst we currently only have copions, we're also thinking about expanding that potentially in the future.
Face huggers.
The ends you could be fighting bosses.
A boss fight?
Yes, we would definitely want bosses. They could be guarding the best loot. They could be mission-based bosses that spawn as well. So whether these boss fights come to the contested zones or not, in 4.0 or beyond, is still up for development, but I would personally really like to see that kind of thing added to contested zones to make them feel special.
So we're adding contested zones for 4.0 really to capitalize on the atmosphere, the lawlessness, having players compete with one another, where there's really that tension of getting that loot out of there, but having to fight your way to do it. Fight your way in, fight your way out.
This is all PvP. So you gotta be careful and always be watching out for other players.
Sounds like a meat grinder.
It could be a meat grinder, especially being in Pyro.
There's a reference there. I don't know how many people would have picked up on that, but during the Pyro playground test, one of the stations pretty much didn't have an armistice zone anywhere, and all the players who would spawn would come running out and just get gunned down. It was like a meat grinder. That reference there, I believe, is actually referencing that particular time. Yeah, Grim, that is actually a concern that I have with regards to these contested spaces. I think it comes down to, though, like, players taking agency to try and expand on them, turn them into more than that. But it also could be like just the AI just constantly streaming in. And there's people out there who want to farm gear. And if you go to Ruin Station, for example, you can farm the gear there. You could go in there looking for specific helmets, specific armors and things like that. Like the cartel, for example, would be looking for that sort of kit to take over to Stanton to sell to all the criminals who are trying to eke out an existence over there. Because not all the criminal players are going to come to Pyro. Some of them are going to try and stay in Stanton. And we're going to need kit that makes us look different from those Care Bears out there.
With the PvP aspect, that's something that we are designing towards. Players may choose to go in to hunt other players, which I think adds a really interesting element to, because not only are you wary of the traps, the puzzles, but you have to kind of be wary, watch your back, ambushes from players. Okay.
For the social core, we've left the green zones so that people can still have an enjoyable social experience. So you don't have to worry about getting ganked every 2 minutes by other players, at least for the social space.
Unlike the global events, such as the Siege of Orison or Overdrive, these are spaces that always exist and that you can always go into.
I think that's a hint, though, that we're probably going to see hard armistice zones in Pyro, and that we're probably not going to have the AI enforcing those armistice zones yet. So at the end of the day, like, it's not a deal breaker for me. I would prefer that we were able to have soft armistice zones inside as well, and that the AI would be the ones handling policing the system, but the game's still being developed, so trying to make sense. The gear was valuable and sought after as in Tarkov. There'd be some motion and drive behind it. Like, what is it? There's an armor set that you can get from the derelict outposts on Thurston and Microtech that have more magazine slots on them than other armor sets. Having that sort of capability I see is important. I think, like, the armor right now, it's just about how much damage you can mitigate. Them differentiating armor by capability beyond how much damage you can take, I think will actually help with driving players, with going after gear beyond visual style as well. Because we're going to want that kit. Like, I kind of hope that they don't do a 50% reduction to a specific... yeah, I get what you mean. I thought you were talking about a 50% reduction against the boss, but, you know, the boss is wearing armor that has more damage mitigation. That's what the cartel would be going after. Like, they would be the ones, like, hunting for this armor and doing these sorts of raids so that they can then sell the armor to other players. There's a potential for economy to come out of this. So it's kind of exciting from that perspective as well. And for it to be so close to a social space too, it may affect the viability of the economy, but then again, like, you won't be trying to sell this armor to players who, like, live on the station. You'll be trying to sell this to players who don't even live in the system.
Loot that you've already gotten is going to come back. The time door that we have is timed based off of the world. So you have a really huge incentive to stay there, to keep holding your ground, to really make this your space as long as you can before other people take it from you. And I think that that's one of the things that's really exciting to me about bringing this to Pyro.
Vision! Night vision!
Pyro has...
I thought, Spectrum would have bloody been a bit more a buzz about that site there, but yeah. Will the NPCs also bring new explosive barrels? No, Fran, you got to bring your own. But you get the new guys to carry. You get the new guys to carry the explosive barrels in. Bring in the 1 SCU barrels. Fucking wipe out half a room.
There's a number of asteroid clusters. They are the newer, larger asteroid clusters, so they should look and feel very different to the ones in Stanton.
New UI.
Asteroid bases for us are really trying to take advantage of our universe better in terms of the locations that we have. Space is big, space is massive, but for our game, often we don't take as much usage of it as we should. We're taking procedural asteroids and we're carving these locations into it. And we're really providing a lot of variety in the gameplay in a form factor of space.
What I'm hoping that we can do with these spaces is settle them. Like, I'm hoping that we can just find one of these and just settle one of them. There's no way to claim them or anything like that. That doesn't bother me if we can't do that. 4.0 is when we're supposed to be getting server meshing. More than likely, it's going to be static server meshing. So as long as you're able to get onto the same server cluster, what I'm hoping that we can do is just find one of these asteroid bases accidentally and just park our ships in there and treat that as our base that we're operating out of. Set up some ships as medical beds or medical bays and store stuff there whilst we're operating out of that place and operate out of that base in preparation for the base. What was it? The human settlements. Apparently we're supposed to be getting some sort of base building or settlement gameplay in 4.0 as well. I haven't talked about it here. Yeah, it's kind of interesting that they're showcasing this. Hopefully we get to, settle asteroid bases, because I would like to do that. As a pirate, I would like my own asteroid base.
Essentially, we're utilizing the station interior set that we have created, and we're wrapping them around an asteroid, a big asteroid that allows us to be a lot more versatile with the kit that we have and create some interesting layouts for you.
Asteroid Base gives us the opportunity to create missions where you can be in space, then you have to go on the interior to continue the mission. We made a little twist of the bunker, a little space where we can have some missions, but in space.
Sometimes we could start with ship combat. You could have heavily defended areas on the outside. You could be engaging enemies outside on the landing pad.
Some of them even have copion infestations.
That should be fun.
That should be fun.
Asteroid bases are not just for combat. Because they're procedural asteroids, one of the things that's really cool about them is we can have multiple routes into these locations. So players can EVA and enter through a vent hatch. You could find your way in through a hangar. You could go straight through the front door. But there's a lot of room for exploration, finding loot that's been hidden there with loot crates, and find certain items that are important for you that you want to use to progress through Pyro, things that you haven't seen before in Stanton.
Can you tell us what that is?
No, I don't want to spoil it.
As a baseline, we wanted to bring Pyro up to par with all the content that we already have in Stanton, but also make it unique. We believe that with the addition of contested zones and asteroid stations,
It was a bit concerning shooting that bloody proximity mine, or that trip mine didn't explode. But I'm hoping that they give us those fucking trip mines so that we can set up traps behind us. As we're going through these spaces, being able to put down a trip mine to stop somebody from shooting us in the back. Whether the mines have a marker/scanner, I don't know. I believe they're just trip mines that have a moving beam that you break, or that you could break, so that they can't completely block off player progression through an area. You gotta think these places are going to be procedurally generated, and they're preparing these pyros, once again, a stepping stone to creating other systems of similar styles. And they're not going to be able to go through every single one of those systems, every single one of those asteroid bases and place the mine. So kind of having that marker or that beam moving around may actually help with placing a threat down, or a passive threat down, but also making sure that it doesn't completely block the progression. Then again, I don't see the real need to do that, block the progression and make them have to blow up the mine.
and all the other little pieces will give us unique aspects that
could be from
really
the helmet
make it
as
feel
well.
different from Stan.
We're really looking forward to you finally getting your hands on the full experience of the stations. There's been a lot of effort put into them. There's a lot more diversity now inside and outside of the stations, both in terms of visuals and design.
Asteroid bases and contested zones for us are two really exciting new location types that we're bringing to the fans for Pyro. It's not a global event, so it's long term. It's always going to be there. You can come back, get new cool stuff, advance your progression, and have fun with your friends and your party, your orgs, and have a great time in Pyro.
What else did we learn this week? Well, we learned that Rough and Ready have cornered the market on space stations in the Pyro system, and that green zones are in place to make the experience in station social areas a bit more manageable for players. That does not extend to the new contested zones, where chaos and carnage will reign supreme, and those who can temper it, solve their puzzles, collect their treasures, and escape will be rewarded for their efforts. And that asteroid bases should allow for a combined arms assault to explore what's contained within, and Christopher doesn't want me to say just yet. We want to make sure it'll work the way we want it to. For Inside Star Citizen, I'm Jared Huckabee. Don't forget to vote in the Ship Showdown when that happens. Don't forget to keep testing 3.24 and 4.0 in PTU when that happens. Thanks for letting us share the people and process of game development when that happens. And we'll see you all here next week for Fire.
That's pretty much it. Nothing more beyond that. That's some of the stuff that they got planned for Pyro 4.0, contested zones. It's an update, really, of what's actually coming. Maybe there is a mark option on the new MVG scope. I think it's probably a combat helmet thing. If you get close enough, it just identifies potential threats. That's what I think it is. But yeah, so that's what's coming in, or what we do in space. That's from Inside Star Citizen. Now, Spectrum never disappoints, and pretty much we have people jumping on there immediately and pretty much shitting on Pyro, the lawless bloody gameplay space of it. We're going to start off with this one right here. Pretty quick one. Got a lot of traction on it though. Why is there combat in the pirate system? I don't know, Fran. I don't make the game. I'm not a game designer. But the Marshmallow Man reacted with Picard Palm. I didn't react with Picard Palm. Not yet. I reacted with Picard Palm now. Pyro and the death of creativity. So I just finished watching ISC. I'll summarize it here. Pyro is Stanton without comma rays. The sum total of new gameplay is in the form of a meat grinder and some Stanton bunkers that are in space. Fucking what? This is hyperbole. And this is what I'm talking about this anti-PvP, anti-pirate, anti-combat rhetoric that's happening in the community. For me personally, it's incredibly sad that a game like Star Citizen with so much creative potential is now presenting the most bog standard cookie cutter walk into this place and try not to get shot gameplay as exciting new stuff that everyone will continuously flock to. Guarantee after a month or two it'll be as abandoned as Ghost Hollow and Jumptown. Also wondering how this type of gameplay fits into the vision of Star Citizen, where death is supposed to be extremely punishing. I'm supposed to fear dying in game, but when you have a PvP dungeon literally right next to the social area where everyone is encouraged to go in and try their luck, with death as a highly probable cause. 182 have upvoted this. 182 people have upvoted it. One, this is a fucking lie, and this is what I'm talking about. Like, people coming into our community and pretty much outright lying. That's not what they said at all. They've just showcased some of the new gameplay that they're bringing into Pyro. And Pyro, they haven't said that Pyro is Stanton without comma rays. In fact, it's not fucking Stanton without comma rays. Pyro is a lot more threatening. Like, it's a fucking criminal system, for fuck's sakes. And this point here, guarantee after a month or two it'll be as abandoned as Ghost Hollow and Jumptown. You know why Jumptown and Ghost Hollow don't get as much traffic as they do when they first came out? Because finding people to fight at those locations is fucking hard. Because we're all in our own little fish bowls right now. We're not in a server meshed environment. When we get server meshing, even the static server meshing, we're going to see player populations increase. And because we see those player populations increase, the chances of running into other players in those PvP areas is going to also increase. Now, there are going to be times across the planet where there's going to be lower player activity than other times. And that's normal. Every game has that problem. But to sit there and go, Ghost Hollow and Jumptown are the examples to, you know, exemplify as to why this particular content for the contested zones isn't going to be as well received or as engaging is idiotic, because you're not even thinking about server meshing. Also wondering how this type of gameplay fits into the vision of Star Citizen, where death is supposed to be extremely punishing. They've never said that it's supposed to be extremely punishing. Like, you're supposed to be cautious about death. You're supposed to not want to die. But this is one of those things where it's like risk versus reward. So when Death of a Spaceman mechanics come in and death starts mattering, if you don't see the juice is worth the squeeze, don't fucking squeeze, right? Don't go for that juice. Yeah, like the rewards in Grimhack, in Ghost Hollow and Jumptown. I always read Grimhacks, GH is Grimhacks. But Ghost Hollow and Jumptown, they're just small amounts of alpha UEC. Like, the draw of Jumptown was always the PvP aspect. Those who went to Jumptown were either there to make a lot of credits or get into fights. But because, you know, the servers are all separated from each other, unless players are agreeing to meet up on a specific server at a specific location, organic PvP is harder to achieve. The server meshed environment makes it easier to achieve that. It'll even be better when we have the dynamic server meshed environment, but we're not going to be getting that for a while. And yes, I agree, Doug. Some people seem to lack the ability to quantify risk. However, I don't think this is somebody lacking the ability to quantify risk. This is somebody having to complain, having to fucking whinge that CIGs put PvP or combat into the spotlight again to try and draw an audience where they don't want that to be the main focus. My concern here is this is the same sort of crowd that we saw over at Elite Dangerous that kept shitting on combat, shitting on PvP, and trying to do everything that they could to convince the developers, don't do that, we don't want that, and that they're brigading these sorts of things. I get it. There's a lot of people that in the community who aren't interested in the combat side of things. That's fine. Your time will come. Pyro, the criminal system where it's supposed to be dangerous and that there's going to be fights. Like, what are you expecting? And death, punishing, like weighing up the risks of that, but trying to push that point of, you know, like death is supposed to be extremely punishing. Death can be extremely punishing without having to like make it so that you're going to lose progress in the sense of your clone deteriorates. Death could be punishing in that your closest respawn is 10 minutes away. That's an extremely punishing death. And when I see these sorts of posts, especially so quickly after fucking Inside Star Citizen comes out, and they're talking about this sort of thing, like this is a type of, for lack of a better term, PSYOP campaign that's being run by an anti-PvP element of our community who just does not want CIG to put any time or effort into PvP beyond what they've already done. They want them to focus on everything else and go, no more PvP stuff, no more combat orientated stuff. Just give us the things that we want now. CIG's had this shit planned out years in advance. You're too late. I'm just glad that the developers, whilst they take the feedback on board, aren't letting that feedback drive their development as hard as what these anti-PvP militant Care Bears are pushing. It also seems to boil down to the scary PvP will gate off content, and they want all of it, even if they don't want to engage in all of the game mechanics. They want the PvP gated off. They want to be able to do all the content but not have to engage in all of the game mechanics. Did I get that right? I don't think I did. I kind of get what you're saying. Yeah, they just want to be able to do everything without any of the risk. No, like, deal with it. But this is... And I didn't grab more Spectrum posts because this is a theme that's actually been going on for the last 2 weeks. And like Space Tomato kind of had a video about Star Citizen has a combat problem. It's like, well, no, it doesn't have a combat problem. And his video, I ended up watching it. It was going to be part of the lineup, but it worked out that this was going to end up going for too long if I had the video there. But the gist I got from his video was that it seems like CIG keeps pushing combat, and they're not really looking at the other options. And to me, it's one of those things where it's like, combat's not a problem in the game. Combat is a pillar of the game. Conflict is actually a pillar of the game. Combat is a part of that. Like, there's always some sort of conflict resolution that needs to happen in some way, shape, or form. Squadron 42, which Space Tomato does highlight, is a huge focus on combat. So bringing all the combat stuff across from Squadron 42 to Star Citizen makes sense, right? The mentality here that combat is a problem in Star Citizen, I wouldn't say that. Like, combat isn't a problem in Star Citizen. The problem is that players out there who don't want to do combat can't accept that the game isn't in the position that will be as engaging for them as what they want it to be. And this all came off the back of the new dynamic mission that's supposed to be coming in 3.24, where Ninetales, it's a blockade mission where Ninetales comes in, steals a whole bunch of cargo and blockades the station, and they're essentially covering the withdrawal of the ships that have the cargo on it. And the players have to go and recover that cargo from Ninetales. And all the Care Bears started complaining. Like, they're all sitting there going, this is bullshit. I don't want to have to do combat in order to, move the cargo. I always thought that I was just going to be able to move cargo from one place to another. We already had a mission like that. Ninetales Lockdown. You guys remember that one? Ninetales Lockdown was supposed to be a PvP mission. What it turned into? It just turned into a cargo running mission where everybody just moved cargo. It was a great time to be a pirate because all the players were coming to a single place. However, we also discovered a whole bunch of exploits during that time as well, which we reported to CIG. I don't think any of them got fixed. The QED zone that had been set up around the station could be bypassed easily. We worked out how to do it pretty quickly too after we started seeing cargo haulers doing it. And because of the way that the mission went was like, you're at a station, so you're in Comare range. So if you started doing any sort of like PvP activity there against any of the other players, you get a crime stat and you're just in a losing battle from the get-go. You're in a losing battle because you're outnumbered by the AI, you're outnumbered by the guns on the station, and the closest places that you can normally go to repair was Grimhex, which was going to be at least a bloody 5-minute trip one way. So if your ship got fucked up and you managed to get away, you're going to be spending at least 10 to 15 minutes getting back into the fight. And eventually that Ninetales blockade runner, like, no PvP was happening at it. It was just cargo haulers, like players would pre-position themselves at all the outposts that sold medical supplies because that's what the stations wanted. The stations wanted medical supplies and they were paying a premium for it. So they'd pay you an inflated amount for the medical supplies and then you get the mission bonuses on top of it. So there were players that were making credits hand over fist doing these missions and they would pre-position because the COG would be announcing when these events would be happening. You'd see all the Hercs line up around all the research outposts at Microtech and Crusader. They're all buying up as much medical supplies as they could. The most frustrating part about it was that we couldn't really take the cargo from them because this was 3.17. We hadn't got 3.18 yet. If we had Ninetales Lockdown during 3.18 and CIG had set up at one of the scrapyards to buy medical supplies, we would have been fucking going gangbusters during that event as pirates. The concept of missing out on even a tiny part of the game doesn't sit well with them. Possibly because some of them have spent large sums of money on the game. They feel entitled to all of the content. Possible that's, their mentality behind it, but it doesn't sit well with me that their mentality is that in order for them to gain access to all of the game, they have to shit on other people to get that. It's like, we don't want you to have your content because we don't get to experience all of it because I don't actually want to engage in that stuff there. I don't want to do that part of the content there. So because of that, like, I want it removed and you have to do the things that I want you to do. It's like the players who tell us that we pirate wrong because we killed the crew. That's not being a pirate, that's being a murder hobo. No, that's being a pirate. Like, we're taking your cargo. Just because we killed you doesn't make us not pirates. And it doesn't make us murder hobos either. We don't have to call you up and ask you if you want to negotiate for your cargo first. Not in our interest to do it anymore either. Like, that's on CIG to make that of value to us. And we've had players try to reach out now. You can count it on one hand the amount of players who have tried attempting to contact us. And we're just going, nah, we're pirating you. You got to fight back. And that actually leads into a bit more of a discussion that I'll talk about later. The mentality that's being demonstrated here is, I was going to say disappointing, but it's actually disgusting. The summary is fucking a lie. That's it. The summary is a lie. Somebody's come onto Spectrum and lied, and either 181 other people have just accepted the lie or 181 other people are contributing to it. And this is a problem within our community, and as far as I'm concerned, if you're interested in the combat side of things or a more balanced style of gameplay, this is the type of thing that we need to combat against. Feel free to go over there, say your piece, Picard Parliament or whatever you want. I'm not going to tell you to brigade it or anything like that this time around. I don't think it's worthwhile doing that, but if you got something to say about it, feel free to. I'm actually going to post this video response. I'll throw it into this as a response to this post. We're going to move on to the next Spectrum post, which is this one here. Why would players go to Pyro? By Volta. After watching the latest ISC, or watching the latest ISC. I'm excited with what you guys are doing in Pyro, but I have concerns. Pyro seems largely lawless outside the green zones, which of course makes it attractive for PvP interested individuals and orgs or murder hobos looking for a more or less consequence-free murder zone. But if you don't have an interest in PvP, why would players set foot in Pyro to do much of the other activities SC has to offer? Mining, trading, etc. all have significant increased risks that may deter many players from doing so simply because they can do them at a far reduced risk in Stanton. Will the economy and pricing reflect the risks traders and miners face? Outside of very lucrative pay for normal activities, why would players risk doing the other activities in Pyro outside of PvP? This is another example of somebody wanting all the reward without the risk. That's what they want. This doesn't sound like it's going to be worth my time because the numbers in my wallet won't go up big enough for me to even bother taking the risk. Finding players when it comes to doing piracy is difficult to do already. Like, you've got to go places and look with your fucking eyeballs if you want to find somebody to pirate. Or you set up a snare along a common trade route and hope that you find someone. But will the economy and pricing reflect the risks traders and miners will face? Yes, COG's already said that. COG's already said that going to Pyro will gain you access to certain commodities and resources that you can't get in Stanton, and vice versa. There'll be certain things that in Pyro that you can't get, and you have to go to Stanton or systems like Stanton to get them. Is the juice worth the squeeze? That's entirely up to you, as the person playing the game. If they make the resource worth more, isn't it a win for piracy? Depends. Value of an object is based on how much the other party values that object, right? So something that's common in Pyro could be worth more in Stanton because you can't get it there. But because it's common in Pyro, it's not worth anything to you there. Attacking somebody in Pyro may not be worth as much as attacking somebody in Stanton, but taking the resources out of Pyro and taking it to Stanton, that is worthwhile. I've talked about it on many occasions. So one of the goals that I have for Mongrel Squad is that we will operate in Stanton. I will go to Pyro to do stuff over there, but I want to operate in Stanton. I want to keep pirates in Stanton, pirating the trade lanes there, because I genuinely believe CRG will eventually set up the infrastructure where there's things that you can only get in Stanton that we can't get in Pyro. So it's in our best interest as pirates. We pirate the stuff in Stanton, we give it to our bloody smugglers in Stanton to take back to Pyro, and they sell it off in Pyro at a marked rate. And then the smugglers bring back stuff from Pyro that you can't get in Stanton into Stanton to trade there. Now you could do piracy in Pyro and do the exact same thing, pirate the common stuff over in Pyro and then have it smuggled into Stanton. I see Stanton as having the more valuable resources to people in Pyro than... I see Pyro as a place where you have the raw stuff and Stanton as the manufactured stuff. And the manufactured items are going to be worth more than the raw materials. Stanton isn't supposed to be a high security zone either, or a high security system. It's like medium. It's the middle of the road system. There will be certain things where you'll have opportunities, but there's going to be some risk there, but it won't be as much risk as what Pyro is, for example. Yeah, like what this person's saying, why would players go to Pyro? Because they fucking want to, as a first answer. But the other reason for it is that there's things that's going to be over in Pyro that you can't get in Stanton. You can buy railguns, you can buy machine guns, you can buy grenade launchers over in Pyro, as a good example. You can't buy those in Stanton. The cartel, the Merrick's cartel, will be buying that stuff in Pyro and smuggling it into Stanton to sell to other players in Stanton. They're already going to do that. They're already planning that stuff out. And they're not the only ones that are going to want to do that. There may be times where we're operating around in bloody Pyro. If we see a ship and we scan it and we see that it's got guns on it and it's not a cartel ship, we may end up hitting it because that's a shipment going to Stanton. And we're going to want that for our cartel to send over there. Trade is going to be more than just the commodities that we have right now. Trade is going to be all the extra shit that we can get. Power plants, quantum drives. And a lot of it can be player driven. But something that a lot of players get, or they seem to forget, is that because there's no sort of UI in the game that facilitates trade between players safely, with an escrow type system, or like making sure that players can't transfer stuff, or when it gets transferred it's done simultaneously. Because Star Citizen is missing that, there's no real player to player trading, or player to player trading. It's too risky to engage in. If that's your mentality towards trading, you're never going to really get the most out of the game. You have to take some risk. You're going to have to. That's just the way that things are. That's part of the conflict resolution that is a common theme throughout Star Citizen. So when I see people posting stuff like this, why would players go to Pyro? It's like, mate, you just won't go there. it won't matter what, the juice just isn't worth the squeeze to you. For you to sit there and be asking this question, like, you just don't seem to be the type of person that will be willing to take that level of risk. One more point, or one more Spectrum post. This one comes from our very own Warhead. It's a bit of a hot take, because I know a lot of people in Mongrel Squad like the idea of these contested zones. And when I first saw this, I immediately thought Dark Zone as well from The Division. We talked about in the last stream on Friday as well. So contested station equals Dark Zone, ew, question mark. I wanted to say a few years ago, but it was 8 years ago. Tom Clancy's The Division came out. Yeah, they actually had a sequel come out in that time too. It featured PvE with Dark Zones, which were a PvP zone with PvE and better loot in it. On the surface, for someone that does not PvP, this sounds great, but it is not a good experience for anyone, less so for the people that want to dip their toes or played solo. Like that of jump gates and EVE Online, the entrance and exit is heavily camped. That problem we wanted to avoid with Star Citizen jump gates? I guess I could complain all day and offer no fixes, but I would offer this instead. This is Pyro, and we already wanted to reduce or remove armistice zones everywhere. Why not have no safe zones in Pyro? Lean harder on reputation and let people go ham even at stations and outposts. TLDR, choke point entrances to the contested area will make solo/small group play and newbie experiences undesirable. I agree with Warhead to a certain point here, in that the entrances, from what we've seen so far, like their choke points, this type of gameplay will be influenced heavily by the choke points, and because it's all inside and internal, unless, like, I know in the areas that I explored you could actually get outside, but the thing is that if you got outside, like you're EVA, you're out in space, you needed to know where you had to go to get to where the landing pads were so that you could actually go into the other parts of the station, during which you're still exposed outside the armistice zones and all that. These areas are going to get camped heavily. We'll make our own entrances with Maelstrom. I don't think it would be that comprehensive when it comes to making our own entrances, but yeah, from my understanding and my explorations the last time during the Pyro playtest, you could go into these contested zones, or where these contested zones were located, through other entrances that were external. It means that you could go out that way too. But the way that they showcased it, they only really showed one real entrance to get in there and leave. So not that great of a look. I would say, will it make solo and small group play and newbie experiences undesirable? I think if new players are going into these zones and getting shat on, welcome to Star Citizen. Solo and small group play, not so sure about. Like we're going to be in the server meshed environment anyway. I think solo and small group play is going to be difficult regardless of where you go. And you're going to have to play a lot smarter. Like in games like, you know, survival games, which Star Citizen has elements of a survival game in it. If you're playing solo, you have to be better. Like you have to be smarter. You have to play completely different to the way that a group would play. Small groups as well, you'd have to play completely different to the way that a larger group would play. You need to play smarter, you need to play a bit more cautiously, you need to try and leverage the mechanics to your advantage. Will we see large groups going around in these contested zones and just shitting on anybody that's there? Yeah, but that's kind of the point of those areas. It's like, it's a PvP zone. Like it's an area that you go into and you can encounter other players. You'll also be encountering the AI. You could be a solo player that goes into this space and there's no other players there and still have a poor experience because you're not that great at FPS gameplay and the AI just shit on you. But I am concerned, like I do share the same concern here with regards to the choke point entrances. And the smartest way of doing this is like, wait until somebody goes in there, the group goes in, they go and grab all the stuff, do all the work, they are about to extract, they're about to go through the gate to leave, and you just cap them all, take the gear and walk through the gate yourself. Hopefully CIG has thought of that, and that they don't, like that they provide provisions to avoid that from happening. I'd say that the best way of handling that would be to have multiple areas where you can drop off your gear, so the item banks inside those contested zones that you can go to and like drop gear off into. Also having extra entrances into these locations, entrance/exits into these locations so that you can get in and get out. The concern, hopefully CIG does pick up on it. Doug points out the dark zones were the end game content. Like you weren't supposed to go there as a new player. And I think as much as I'd like to think that Pyro is kind of like the end game content, I would say that this is one of those situations where you'll be able to spawn in and it's kind of like pick your own starting experience. And I think this is where it'll be really important for CIG try and guide people who haven't played Star Citizen yet towards Stanton. And those who have been playing Star Citizen for a while, You can go to Stanton if you want and continue doing what you're doing there, or you know, we got this place over here. It's a bit more hardcore. Feel free to go there, go ham, but you're on your own. Hello, Ark. You're excited about these contested zones? I wouldn't say that I'm fully excited about them, but I am like interested in them. It's not going to be my focus, but if I've got some time, I'll consider popping in. I think it will definitely result in some good gameplay experiences, but it still wouldn't be my focus. This would just be like a bit of spice, a little bit of flavoring. Just a little bit of flavoring there for the gameplay. Gear banks for 324 in certain locations would be great, with limitations such as inventory space so you don't deposit your own kit, only a piece or two. Yeah, like I think CIG would probably just go with whole kit, like drop in the whole kit though. Because when you think about it, like you're already limited on what you can and can't move. Because those kiosks, the item kiosks, in terms of like depositing things, is already a painful experience as it is. And because you're in a PvP zone, trying to deposit anything, like it would be a static location that people are going to go to. So somebody's going to be camping it. So if you're going to go deposit gear, everybody that's in your group, like if you're a solo player, you're like taking a huge risk. But if you're in a group, before you even go to deposit, you're going to have your entire group's going to go through and just start clearing house and going ham on anything that moves. I want to lock that area down. And then there'll still be that fucking sneaky rat there with a sniper rifle. And because it's so close, they don't need to use the bloody 8x scope, so they avoid the sniper glint. Just cap the guy that's trying to deposit the stuff. Everybody starts freaking out. I think limiting how much gear you can deposit needs to be that big of a concern. I'd say just let them deposit as much as they can, because they're already taking a huge risk by trying to do it there. Like you could do it the safer way where you try and extract out of the area or get through the gate, or you can, like, if you want to stay in there longer, throw it into the item banks there that can be camped by anybody. Risk it for the biscuit. I'm going to finish up there on that particular subject. That was Inside Star Citizens Alpha 4.0, what we do in space, showcasing the state of the stuff for pyros, contested zones, talking about a couple of opinions that people have for it. I think it's important that we make sure that we do get out there and combat the anti-PvP rhetoric, the anti-combat rhetoric that's starting to be drummed up in the community, and make sure that we are providing a different voice on that as well. Whilst I don't think CIG will capitulate to them, it's possible that it could happen. Marketing could start trying to influence the development direction sooner. You hope they really attract people with proper rewards, not a Ghost Hollow sort of meh deal. Yeah, Ghost Hollow was supposed to be attractive to just for the PvP crowd. And those credits were like, yeah, you can make a lot of credits from it, but it's not. Like the problem with Ghost Hollow is just you can't find other people doing it too often. Thanks guys for coming along for this particular subject. For those who are watching on YouTube, every Sunday, 7:30 PM Australian Eastern Standard Time, GMT +10, I do reactions and rants on Twitch at twitch.tv/Mongrel Squad. Come along, get to see it happening live.